The world's watching and dealing with COVID-19. Economic effects, the health effects. It's affected every single one of our families in some way. While the world's watching and we're dealing with all those issues here in the United States, can't lose track of what's happening on the world stage. Because China is using this moment when the world's distracted to be able to push its way into Hong Kong and to break its word. And when we deal with China, we know what they've done, the predatory tactics they've taken, either on their own people or to countries around the world. The United States of America, when we do foreign aid, we go help other countries gain more freedom, more security, more stability, more economic growth. We don't ask anything in return. We engage with them to be able to help them. China is working with developing countries around the world by moving into different countries and taking collateral of their ports, of their airports, and establishing military bases around the world when poorer countries default on the loans that they give them. They're not helping other countries, they're taking over other countries. They're stepping into country after country and offering them great new technology from Huawei to be able to help their cell phone systems. They're establishing security systems around their banks, but what they're really doing is monitoring their people and gathering data on people all around the world. The security systems aren't there to set up and prop up dictatorships in poor countries. They're there for the dictatorship of China to be able to track what's going on there in any international development. We should be aware of what China is doing, and we should not ignore this moment for the free people of Hong Kong. Today, many Americans are aware of how China has handled the issue of protective equipment. The medical equipment that we desperately needed in March, April, May, much of it manufactured in China, we could not get because the Communist government of China kept the materials from American companies that were manufacturing in China. The Chinese Communist government wouldn't allow the exportation of that. They just took that equipment over, putting all of the schedules behind. And suddenly Americans woke up and understood that our supply chains are at risk. Our pharmaceutical supply chains are at risk. Our PPE supply chains are at risk. And what many people don't know is our rare earth minerals and critical minerals supply chain is at risk. Lots of folks really like the solar panels and electric car batteries. Well, great, except for the rare earth minerals that are in those are completely dependent on China. And if we don't develop our own sourcing for those rare earth minerals, which we have those same rare earth minerals here, if we don't develop our own supply chain, if we don't develop our own manufacturing for pharmaceuticals and for the precursors of pharmaceuticals, we will continue to be vulnerable to the Chinese government. And at the moment the Communist government determines, they will take over that supply and we will be at risk. For decades, the Confucius Institutes have thrived on college campuses, spreading a communist philosophy all through our college campuses. It is now at a moment that that college campuses and leadership in colleges are starting to wake up to be able to say, why are we allowing communist indoctrination on our campuses? It's a bill that I have pushed, that I'll continue to be able to push, to be able to wake up our universities to say, why are we allowing this on our campus? It's an issue that I've pushed for years, dealing with communist Chinese spying on American technology, and also stealing our scientists and inventions. They come over with a grant from the United States and say they're going to send over researchers when really what they're doing is harvesting the research and taking it back to China. They take materials, whether it be music or movies or any items of production, and in all that manufacturing that comes to China, they'll then take that same technology, move it to a different factory, and literally compete against the first company. Because to do business in China, you have to turn over all your intellectual property to the Communist government, who then takes it and uses it on their own. The Communist Chinese government is not the ally of freedom for the world. And we should be aware of that. Certainly the people of Hong Kong are aware of that. In 1997, after 150 years as a British territory, Hong Kong became a part of China under the Joint Declaration. It was this one country, two systems, that Hong Kong for 50 years would remain autonomous and free. Well, just over 2 decades later, the Chinese government has broken their promise and Hong Kong is no longer free. While the world is consumed with what's happening with COVID-19, the communist government has moved into Hong Kong and has taken it over. They passed a law in Beijing that they sent over and declared into Hong Kong that you can't have anything what they call subversion, organization and perpetuation of what they call terroristic activities, collusion with a foreign country or an external element, which I'll explain later. This new security law literally was delivered to the people of Hong Kong at midnight, and it went into place immediately. Then the next step was Chinese Communist police, military, law enforcement moved into Hong Kong to begin to implement this. Threats to free speech immediately stopped. Those protesters that were out on the street just wishing to be able to vote and to be able to speak their mind were immediately rounded up. Teachers and academics have been arrested or fired or threatened. Communist Chinese leaders have contacted them to reprimand them about teaching about human rights in their classroom. Remembering that in Hong Kong, it was a required class in Hong Kong just weeks ago to learn about human rights and freedom, and now the Chinese government is removing those teachers and threatening any other teacher that teaches about human rights that they will be removed. Faith leaders have been squashed. You see, under this security law that is passed, you can't have any external element collusion. They define external element as any kind of worship of God as well that does not align with the communist government. So any faith-based group that is there in Hong Kong is immediately being squashed. The Muslim Uyghurs are gathered up in communist China and put in concentration camps to re-educate them on how to be more Chinese. Now the people of Hong Kong are experiencing that same type of oppression as the first step has stepped in to take away their right to free speech, their right to gather and protest, and now also their right to be able to have freedom of faith. Leaders of the democracy movement have already been rounded up and arrested. This is something that we should not ignore. We have said as a world, never again, and we should engage. Now, while I know many people in my state will say we should focus on COVID-19, and we should, there's much that needs to be done. We cannot take our eye off of freedom around the world as well, and the people of Hong Kong. As they lose their freedom, the world loses freedom. And China sees it can move into one more place, one more time. Taiwan is next, and they will continue to be able to move in this same way. We should stay engaged. There's multiple bills this body has already done on sanctions, and we should continue. We should continue to be able to press in, to be able to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves in Hong Kong and that are being isolated. Senator Tim Kaine and I just dropped a bill yesterday dealing with internet freedom for the people of Hong Kong, saying that the American government should be engaged in trying to break through what is called the Great Firewall in China. So we know they will extend this firewall into Hong Kong as well, and will prevent the people of Hong Kong from access to social media, interacting with each other, or information on the outside world, just like they have with the people of China. But the people of Hong Kong have grown up and lived in freedom. They know what it means to get outside information, and the Chinese government is actively working to shut that down. We should actively work to push back on that, to make sure the free people of Hong Kong continue to be able to communicate with each other and with the outside world, and so that we can stay engaged with that basic function of human rights. That's why Senator Kaine and I are so passionate about this. We should engage as a government to make sure that they can continue to have the free speech that we have. When anyone loses their human rights and dignities, the world loses human rights and dignities. Again, I'm aware there are many things that need to happen with COVID-19 right now, and we're actively working on those things as well, and should. But we should not lose track of freedom. Freedom is our responsibility to model and to live and to help other free people to guard. Let's stand with the people of Hong Kong. With that, I yield the floor.